Today topic is GST valuation overview. Overview of the GST valuation. So how to valuation the GST? Here under section 15 of CGST Act 2007, what is valuation in the context of GST and why is correct valuation critical for GST compliances? So what is the meaning of this? The price actually paid her payable for the supply of goods or services where the supplier and the recipient are not related. And also price is the sole consideration. So here how to calculate the valuation of the stock, the transaction value will be include, the valuation is be include taxes, that means other than GST, and any amount paid by recipient on behalf of supplier, incidental expenses and interest, if any late fee also, and any penalty also, and some subsidies also, other than government subsidies. These are all inclusion in transactions value. What are that? Taxes, amount paid by the recipient on behalf of the supplier, and any incidental expenses, that means commission, any packing charges like that, and also interest, late fee, penalty should be included in the transaction value. Okay, so now what are the exclusions from transactions value? Which 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 expenses, which one is deducted and discounted? That means what? Pre-supply discounts. What are that? Pre-supply discounts and post-supply discounts. These are all exclusion from transaction value. The valuation rules for under section 6, under section 15, is it applicable for valuation of GST? Rule 27 is the value when consideration is not wholly in money, and Rule 28 value of supply between related or distinct process, and Rule 29 supply through agent. The Rule 30 is the cost based valuation, that means 110 percentage of cost, and Rule 31 residual method. In some special cases, there are some free samples or gifts, and any barter exchange, and any stock transfer, and import of services from related to persons, and pure agent concepts. These are all Rule 33. So, for example, common steps here in this is under invoicing, ignoring related party transactions, or incorrect handling of discounts is the calculation of GST. So, valuation of in GST. That means determine the value on which GST is to be charged. What is the meaning of valuation of GST? Determine the value on which GST is to be charged. It is a crucial because why? Because the GST amount is calculated as a percentage of the taxable value of goods or services supplied. So the meaning of transaction value, section 15, subsection 1, the price actually paid or payable when supplier and recipient are not related and price is the sole consideration. So which one is included? That means already we discussed taxes under section this the inclusion in transaction values, section 15 subsection 2. 1 minute. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Under section 15, subsection 2, inclusion in transaction value is, that means added to the transaction value, taxes, duties, any cesses, here except the GST, and amount paid by recipient on behalf of the supplier. Okay. And also included any interest, late fee, any penalty for delayed payment, and non-government subsidies directly linked to the price. Which one is excluded? Already we discussed. What are the rule are discussed? But for example, Rule 27 is consideration not wholly in money. That means that value is calculated, for example, open market value or some total of money and monetary equivalents. In the case of Rule 28, supply between related and distinct persons. In this case, open market value are like kind and quality. And here exemption of ITC. ITC means input tax credit. And in the case of agent transaction rule 29, open market value, that means 90 percentage release price, and cost based valuation. How to calculate cost based valuation here is 110% of cost production of acquisition. And here residual method means here residual method. Are you audible? Yeah. Residual method is the means consist with principles of valuation. Next, Rule 31A, valuation in case of lottery, betting, gambling. Which fixed valuation of percentage is taken it as valuation of GST. In the case of special cases, for example, in free samples, no GST unless input tax credits were available. And in the case of stock transfer, GST applicable is transferred between distinct persons, that means different states. And in the case of barter system and any exchange system, valued as per rules. And in the case of pure agent, that means through agent, reimbursed expenses excluded if conditions of Rule 30 is applicable. Okay. For example, when you take product price is 10,000, say product price is 10,000 and freight charges are 1,000, insurance 500, and if discount shown on invoice is 1,000. So what is the taxable value here? Production price is 10,000 plus freight charges 1,000 plus insurance 500 and plus discount shown on invoice is sorry, discount is deducted. So first 1,000 10 plus 10,000 plus 500. How much? 10, 11, 11,500. From that, you deduct the discount shown. So discount is how much? 1,000. So 11,500 minus 1,000, you get 10,500. That apply on GST on 10,500. So valuation of the valuation of the GST is here how much before the taxation of the GST? 10,500. Like that, you have to calculate. Okay. Yeah, next one, next topic, tax deducted at source. Tax deducted at source. So, in the case of tax deducted at source under GST, that means what? What is the meaning? Before that, you have to discuss what is the meaning of tax deducted source. That means it is a mechanism to collect tax at the source of income generation. Source of income generation. Here, a summary of how it works under the goods and services tax in India. Okay, so here, when it is applicable in India on TDS, TDS is applicable under Section 51 of the CGST Act 2017. TDS is applicable under Section 51 of the CGST Act 2017. So, who is applicable? That means who is required to deduct TDS? Who are applicable? First one, departments or establishments of the central or state government. That means central and state government departments and establishments, authorities, and local authorities, any governmental agencies, any entities notified by the government. For example, public sector units. All public sector units are comes under TDS. Okay, so who are required to deduct the TDS? All the central and state government departments, local authorities, government agencies, and all public sector units. Okay, so now when it is deducted, when it is to deducted TDS, TDS to be deducted if the total value of supply, if the total value of the supply under a contract exceed 2.5 lakhs. Here, excluding GST. How much? 2.5 lakhs exceed అంటే TDS applicable. And the payment is made to a supplier of taxable goods or services. Okay. Who are comes under TDS? Who are exceed 2.5 lakhs. Next, what is the percentage of tax deducted source? Here 1% under CGST and 1% under SGST. In the case of intrastate supply, okay. In the case of intrastate supply, how much percentage calculated on TDS for the GST? 1% for CGST, 1% for SGST. CGST means what here? Central Goods and Service Tax. SGST means for State Goods and Service Tax. When it is applicable, this 1% intrastate supply. Okay. Next, in the case of interstate supply of goods or services, 2% under IGST. That means interstate supply lo only have to pay what? IGST, integrated goods and service tax. How much percentage? 2%. Okay. So next, how to file the filing of the TDS return. TDS returns ni ఎలా ఫైల్ చేస్తారు? The TDS deductors must file form GSTR 7. Which form? GSTR 7 by the 10th of the next month. 10th of the next month. When it is returns the file, that file, first you have to fill the form GSTR 7 and 10th of the next month. If any deductees are there, you want the TDS certificate. So in regard this, you have to fill the form GSTR 7A. Okay. Next, how much credit to deductees? What is the procedure? The TDS deducted will reflect in the deductees, that means suppliers, electronic cash ledger. So you know the electronic cash ledger and uh, debit ledger, like that. It can be used for payment of tax, like that interest, penalty, or other any liabilities under GST. Okay. What are the exemptions when TDS is not applicable? That means who are not exceed. Who is applicable for TDS అంటే ఏమనుకున్నాం? Exceed 2.5 lakhs అనుకున్నాం కదా. మరి exemptions ఎవరెవరికి అని అంటే who are not does not exceed 2.5 lakhs like that. So when location ఇక్కడ వన్ మోర్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ పాయింట్ ఎవరు ఎగ్జామ్షన్ లకు వస్తారు టీడీఎస్ కిందికి రారు టీడీఎస్ ఎగ్జామ్షన్స్ ఎవరెవరికి అని అంటే when location of supplier and place of supply is different from the recipient state. Recipient state కి location of the supplier, place of the supplier ఇద్దరు different way లో ఉంటే in that case exemption is applicable. Okay. Next, when total amount does not exceed 2.5 lakhs, just now we discussed, and any exempted goods or services, or if the supplier is unregistered person. So these are all comes under TDS. TDS means what here? Tax deduct at source. Tax deduct at source under GST. Okay. Next, tax collected at source. Okay, these are all important short questions, and again comes under long questions also. They asked only write about the tax deducted source in the case of GST, and also we call tax collected at source in the case of GST, and also we call TDS and TCA, the tax collected at source, TDS and TCA, tax collected at source. How to calculate అనేది అడుగుతాడు. Okay, now 1 minute. Tax collected at source. Here, what is the meaning of tax collected at source under GST? Here, e-commerce operators from the payments made to the suppliers, that means sellers who sell goods or services through their online platform. Tax collected under us refers to tax collected who is considered as online platform యూజ్ చేస్తున్నాం అని అంటే మనము ఈ ట్యాక్స్ కలెక్టెడ్ సోర్స్ ని యూజ్ చేసుకుంటాం. ఓకే, సో when it is applicable, when it is tax collected at source applicable. Here, a supplier sells goods or services through an e-commerce platform, electronic commerce platform use చేస్తున్నట్లయితే you have to follow the tax collected at source. Here, the payment for such suppliers is collected by the e-commerce operator only. So what is the percentage? How to calculate TCS? Here, 0.5 percentage under CGST and 0.5% under HGST for the intrastate suppliers. Tax rate TCS rate is how to calculate in the case of intrastate suppliers, 0.5 percentage under CGST and 0.5 percentage under the SGST. Total, you have to calculate 1 percentage of the GST. And again, in the case of interstate suppliers, have to TCS rate is how much? 1 percentage under IGST. Okay, 0.5 percentage CGST and 0.5 percentage SGST in the case of intrastate suppliers. In the case of interstate supply, how much tax collected at source? 1 percentage. Okay, next, returns file. when it is returns filed, which form you have to fill. In the case of a tax deducted source TDS, you have to fill the form GSTR 7. But in the case of TCS tax collected at source, the operator must be file GSTR 8 monthly by the 10th of the next month. Same like that TDS. TDS అయినా TCS అయినా సేమ్ 10th ఆఫ్ ద నెక్స్ట్ మంత్ అప్లై చేసుకోవాలి. బట్ ఫార్మ్స్ ఫిల్ చేయడం మాత్రము అది GSTR 7, ఇది GSTR 8. ఓకే, సో ద TCS collected will reflect in the electronic cash ledger of రెస్పెక్టివ్ సప్లయర్. ఎక్కడ కనిపిస్తుంది మనకి ఇక్కడ క్యాష్ లెడ్జర్ లో ఎలక్ట్రానిక్ క్యాష్ లెడ్జర్ అకౌంట్ లో కనిపిస్తుంది. వాట్ ఆర్ ద ఎగ్జంప్షన్స్ హియర్? Not applicable if the e-commerce operator is merely acting as a service provider and now not collecting payment on behalf of the suppliers. Would you, okay? These are all the exemptions for the TCS. So next topic, input tax credit. What is the meaning of input taxes? Last class we discussed about the input tax credit. Hmm? Yes. Here, input tax credit is a fundamental concept under the goods and services tax regime in India, and it allows businesses to reduce their tax liability by claiming credit for the tax paid on purchase used for business purposes. Okay, so how to calculate, what is the meaning of ITC? Okay, here it means the credit of GST. That means either CGSTR, SGSTR, UTGSTR, or IGSTR. That means Central Goods Service Tax, State Goods Service Tax, United Territory Goods Service Tax, either integrated GST. In this case, it can be claimed by a registered taxpayer to reduce the tax payable on outward supply. Here, inward supply means purchases. Outward supply means sales. When sales it's occur, the tax is reduced in the case of pay. You have to availing the input tax credit. For example, uh, you take if a trader pays 10,000 GST on purchases and collects 15,000 GST on sales. Okay, they can claim on ITC of the 10,000 and pay only 5,000 to the government. Okay, why? Because first he pay it, the trader pays 10,000 GST already on purchase and collects for 15,000 GST on sales. They can claim only 10,000. Instead of 10,000, they only paid to the 5,000 to the government. This is the procedure for calculation of ITC. Next, who are eligible under ITC? ఎవరెవరికి eligible అవుతుంది? Who are under eligible for ITC? So here, a taxpayer can claim ITC if the following conditions are for. What are the conditions? It must be registered person under GST. అంటే ఐటీసీని క్లెయిమ్ చేసుకోవాలంటే కంపల్సరీ రిజిస్టర్డ్ పర్సన్ అయి ఉండాలి. must process a valid tax invoice, that means debit note or other prescribed document also, and goods or services must have been received. The supplier must have paid the tax to the government and filled GSTR 1 and GSTR 3. కంపల్సరీ సప్లయరు ఏం ఫిల్ చేయాల్సి ఉంటుంది? జిఎస్టిఆర్ 1 అండ్ జిఎస్టిఆర్ 3. Next, the invoices must be reflected in the recipient GSTR 2B, and ITC must be claimed within the time limit. What is the time limit here? Earlier of the two situations. What are the situations? Here, 30th November following the end of the financial year, the end of the financial year, 30th November, and date of filing the annual return. ఎప్పుడైతే నువ్వు ఫైలింగ్ చేస్తున్నావో యాజ్ పర్ జిఎస్టిఆర్ 9 రిటర్న్స్ ఫైల్ చేసిన డేటు అండ్ 30th November the following the financial year, whichever is earlier, that one is ITC claim date. Okay, and who are not comes under ITC అంటే కెనాట్ బి క్లెయిమ్డ్, అంటే ఐటీసీ అప్లికబుల్ కాని వాళ్ళు, ఇన్పుట్ ట్యాక్స్ క్రెడిట్ కిందకి రాని వాళ్ళు ఎవరెవరు? మోటార్ వెహికల్స్. ఓకే, మోటార్ వెహికల్స్ ఇందులో కూడా సర్టన్ ఎగ్జామ్షన్స్ ఉన్నాయి. ఎగ్జామ్షన్ యూజ్ చేసుకొని కూడా జనాలు అందరూ బయటకు వస్తారు. ఓకే, మోటార్ వెహికల్స్, పర్సనల్ కన్సంప్షన్ ఎక్స్పెన్సెస్, and works contracts except for a plant and machinery, and goods lost, anyone goods lost that stolen, destroyed, or given as gifts or free samples, these are all not comes under ITC group. Next, members of clubs, health and fitness centuries, these are all exemption అంటే వీళ్ళు ITC not applicable. Next, how to utilize the ITC. Here, you know the GSTs, CGST, SGST, IGST. Na? When you utilize the ITC amount to the CGST, SGST, IGST, first you have to pay the, for example, IGST is there. IGSTలో మీకు ఇన్పుట్ ట్యాక్స్ క్రెడిట్ ఉంది. ఎంత? ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ 10,000 ఉంది. 10,000లో 5,000 ఐజిఎస్టి ఉంది, 4,000 సిజిఎస్టి ఉంది, 2,000 ఎస్జిఎస్టి ఉంది. యూ హ్యావ్ టు పే 5,000, 4,000, 2,000. సో హియర్ ఐజిఎస్టి క్రెడిట్లో మీకు టోటల్ అమౌంట్ ఈజ్ హౌ మచ్? 10,000. So in this regard, you have to pay first IGST amount, that means 5,000 amount. Remaining 5,000 amount, so 10,000 minus 5,000 equal to 5,000. That 5,000 amount, next you have to pay, what is that? CGST 2,000. Next that one is you have to pay 5,000, 2,000. Next what? 1,000. Sorry, 2,000. So here what? How much amount is there? Only 1,000. You have 2,000 SGST. So here remaining amount in IGST is how much? 10,000 minus 5,000 for IGST and 4,000 for CGST. 5 plus 4, 9. 10 minus 9 equal to only 1,000. So you have to claim the ITC for SGST only 1,000. Remaining 1,000 you have to carry forward. That's all. This is the procedure for claiming of the ITC. Okay. Next, if you have amount in CGST, first here you have to pay the CGST. Okay. For example, ITC for CGST is equal to 10,000. Again, you take 10,000. So CGST amount is 5,000, and then IGST amount 4,000. Again here CGST, SGST also 2000. So here CGST amount is how much? 10,000. Na? In 10,000, first you have to pay here CGST. In the case of IGST, you have to pay the IGST. In the case of CGST, first you have to pay the CGST. Remaining amount only you have to pay the IGST, SGST. In the case of CGST, ITC claiming. Okay. First, you have to pay the CGST, after that IGST, and after that who annual SGST amount. Okay. Next, SGST amount is not applicable. Why? Because CGST amount, CGST ITC not spent for SGST. Okay. So here you have to pay only CGST and IGST. So remaining amount have to carry forward to the next year. Next, SGST. SGST amount first you have to use for SGST, then IGST. Not claim to the CGST. Okay. So here overall meaning is what? In the case of IGST claiming law, IGST approves ITC claiming law. First, you have to pay the IGST amount, after that, central and state. But in the case of CGST credit amount law, only we have to use the CGST uh, and then IGST, not consider as SGST. Okay. So same in the case of SGST amount, use SGST and IGST, not completed in the CGST. Okay. These are all input tax credit, how to utilized in the case of IGST, CGST, SGST. Okay. So next, input service distributor, ISD అని ఉంటుంది. What is the meaning of input service distributor here? ISD is an office that receives invoices for services and distribution ITC to other branches with proper documentation. And here, used matching mechanism. The ITC claim in GSTR 3B must match with the supplier's GSTR 1 that reflected to also GSTR 2B. Mismatches may lead to denial of credit. This is the procedure. What is the meaning of ITC? How to claim the ITC? What is the procedure in calculation of GST? Okay. One more topic also is there in ITC, that means input tax credit. 1 minute. Hello. Here, registration is compulsory in the case of ITC. So, who is applicable in ITC registration? Registration is mandatory. Input tax credit can be availed only by such person who are registered persons only. A person who is not registered cannot claim ITC even if such person is paying GST. Okay, that means what here? Only registered persons మనకు ఐటీసీని క్లెయిమ్ చేయడానికి వీలవుతుంది. ఒకవేళ అన్రిజిస్టర్డ్ పర్సన్స్ జిఎస్టి పే చేసినప్పటికీ ఐటీసీ క్లెయిమ్ చేయడానికి వీలు లేదు. ఓకే, నెక్స్ట్ ద ట్యాక్స్ మస్ట్ హ్యావ్ బీన్ పేడ్ ఫర్ గూడ్స్ and services used for furtherance of business only. That means here a registered person is entitled to take input tax credit of tax charged on any supply of goods or services or both if such goods or services are used or intend to be used in the course of furtherance of the business. What is the meaning of course of furtherance of the business? Means continuation of the business. So here GST payable on goods or services which are not to be used in business cannot be claimed if the goods or services are only partly used for business, then only proportionate amount can be claimed, not full. Okay. So here GST law puts emphasis on the tax collected by the supplier from the recipient is paid to the government by the supplier only. Who is the recipient here? Receipt of goods or services in the case of ITC. The goods or services for which GST has been paid and ITC is being claimed must have been received or deemed to have been received by the person claiming the ITC. What are the documents you have to fill? The person who comes under ITC claiming is the tax paying documents such as tax invoice, debit note, etc., etc., must be compulsory have to attach. Next, GSTR returns. Returns here to claim ITC, GST returns should have been submitted by the supplier. And credit for goods against an invoice received in lots or installment can be availed only on receipt of the last lot installment time only. Last time installment only. Next, time for claiming has not lapsed. What is that? So ITC can be claimed only within the timelines for entitlement of credit against a particular invoice only. So the due date is September month, returns after the end of the financial year are filing the return. Filing the return. Okay. So here who are applicable, how to claim the GST and how to decide the SGST, IGST. Okay. And one more important in ITC cannot be availed. Who are comes under not applicable ITC. Here, goods or services used for private or personal consumption. The case of private and personal consumption, who are used for private or personal consumption, and goods or services used mainly for the purpose of personal use or consumption of the employees. Personal use of the consumption of the employees also not claiming the ITC. Okay, are you clear? Fine. One more. Motor vehicles used except when supplied for providing taxable services of transportation of passengers, goods and training and driving skills, and also the goods or services on which consumption tax have been paid, and any goods lost, stolen, or destroyed or distributed as pre-samples or gifts. These are also not consider, not claiming the ITC. So, and one more important point, ITC is not eligible on invoice after filing of return for the month of September of the end of the financial year, or when date of filing of amount returns for the set year also, whichever is early is ITC is not eligible on the invoice. Okay. How to claim the ITC in respect of IGST, CGST, and SGST also just now we completed, and GST returns filled. How to fill the GST returns. So here file the returns, GST returns files means here with tax authorities by registered dealer. So the tax authorities calculated tax and sanction input credit on timely basis. Okay. How to? There are so many forms are there. We discussed about that. So GSTR1. GSTR1 form. This is for details of outward supplies of taxable goods or services affected. Outward supply means what here? Sales. Outward supply means what? Sales. In the case of sales, that means outward supplies, the due date is 11th of next month. The due date is 11th of next month. And GSTR 2, this form is for details of inward supplies of taxable goods or services and also claiming ITC. Also claiming ITC. GSTR 2. So for this due date is what? 15th of next month, not in force. Okay, 15th of next month and not in force. Next, GSTR 3. GSTR 3 is the monthly return on the basis of finalization of details of outward suppliers and inward suppliers along with payment of amount of tax. Okay. So here, what is the due date here? 20th of the next month. And if GSTR 3 is replaced with GSTR 3B also. Okay. So first three GSTR1, GSTR2, GSTR3 for what purpose? GSTR1 is the outward supply, GSTR2 is the inward supply, and GSTR3 the monthly returns. Any returns is there. The due dates for GSTR1 is what? 11th of next month, GSTR2 for 15th of next month, GSTR3 for 20th of the next month. Okay. Next, GSTR 4A. Return for composition scheme. మనం కాంపోజిషన్ స్కీమ్ కూడా నేర్చుకున్నాం ఫిఫ్త్ సెమ్ లో. ఫిఫ్త్ సెమ్ లో కాంపోజిషన్ స్కీమ్, హూ ఆర్ కమ్స్ అండర్ కాంపోజిట్ డీలర్, వాట్ ఈస్ ద మీనింగ్ ఆఫ్ కాంపోజిట్ డీలర్ అన్నాం. హూ ఆర్ నాట్ ఎక్సీడింగ్ అంటే బిలో ద థ్రెష్ లిమిట్ అంటాం. అండ్ ఆల్సో 1.5 crores తక్కువగా ఉన్న వాళ్ళందరూ కాంపోజిషన్ స్కీమ్ కిందకి వస్తారు అనుకున్నాం. సో ఫర్ దట్ రిటర్న్స్ ఫైల్ ఏ ఫామ్ ఫిల్ చేయాలి? GSTR 4A. For this due date is what? 18th of month succeeding the quarter. Succeeding the quarter. Next, GSTR 5. Here, return for non-resident foreign taxable person. What is that? Non-resident foreign taxable person. Fill the form. Which form? GSTR 5. So, what is the due date here? 20 days after the end of next month. What is the due date here? 20 days after the end of next month. Next, GSTR 6. GSTR 6 is IST returns. So for this, due date is what? That 13th of the 30th, 13th of next month. The due date is IST return 13th of next month. Next, GSTR 7. Here, return for authorities deducting tax at source. TDS just మనం ఇంతకుముందే ఈ టాపిక్ లోనే ఈ క్లాస్ లోనే మనం ఏం నేర్చుకున్నాం? ట్యాక్స్ డిడక్టెడ్ సోర్స్ అండ్ ట్యాక్స్ కలెక్టెడ్ సోర్స్ గురించి నేర్చుకున్నాం కదా. సో For GSTR 7 is written for authorities deducting tax at source. Due date is for that 10th of next month. 10th of next month. Next, GSTR 8 written to be filled by a commerce operator and the amount of tax collected 10th of next month. Okay. Next, GSTR 9 annual return. Annual return date is what? 31st December of succeeding financial year. What is the date? 31st December of succeeding financial year. Next, GSTR 10 final returns. Here, within 3 months of date of cancellation or a date of cancellation order, whichever is later, the final returns will be applicable. Okay. Next, GSTR 11. So here GSTR 11 details of inward supplies to be furnished by the person having UIN number and claimed referring. So for this 28th of the for month following the month of for which statement is filled. These are all returns filing and also applicable for ITC who are applicable ITC, how to fill the form, రిటర్న్స్ ఫైల్ ఎలా చేస్తారు, ఏ డేట్న చేయాలి, ఎవరు ఎప్పుడు చేయాలి, ఏ ఫామ్ ఫిల్ చేయాలి అనేది. జిఎస్టిఆర్ 1 ఎవరు, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 1, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 2, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 3, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 4A, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 5, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 6, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 7, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 8, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 9, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 10, జిఎస్టిఆర్ 11. These are some due dates for GSTR 1 is what? 11th of next month, and the due date for GSTR 2 for 15th of next month, and GSTR 1 is applicable for details of outward supply, GSTR 2 is applicable for details of inward supply, and GSTR 3 due date is what? 20th of the next month, like that. Okay. So next topics is what? Just now you see the syllabus. What are the topics completed? So first GST accounting, this not all GST valuation, completed valuation, tax deducted source and tax collected at source, and next third block, in third block input tax credit and GST returns. Today completed input tax credit and GST returns. Next what? GST administration, appeals and revisions. Okay. So in that, what are the administration and officers of GST, appeals and revisions, and some miscellaneous provisions, GST rules. Next word, Customs Act. That means custom law and valuation baggage. Total how many units here? 5 units. So in block one, GST accounting. I will tell next class. I completed the block two GST valuation and tax deducted at source, tax collected at source, and input tax credit mechanism. Okay. So and one more topic also pending in GST returns. After that, we go to the fourth unit, fourth block. Okay. Yeah. One minute. What of the please completed. Yeah. Advanced accounting in GST. You know the financial accounting now? Yes or no? Yeah. Here, advanced accounting in GST involves the accurate treatment or recording and reconciliation of the. So the transaction within an entity's financial system, that one is called advanced accounting in GST. Okay. Here, classification of tax rates here, proper classification of goods or services under the HSN number, SAC number, code is essential for correct tax rate applicable. So, accounting entries have to write first, you have to decide the intrastate suppliers or interstate suppliers. In the case of intrastate suppliers, you have to pay the CGST and SGST. In the case of interstate supply, you have to pay the only IGST. So, for example, when you take purchases, that means inward supply. Purchases means in the GST terms, inward supply. Inward supply for entry for inward supply. For example, purchases 1 lakh amount. So here on 1 lakh, in the case of intrastate supply, 1 lakh purchases within the state, that means Hyderabad to Warangal, X purchases 1 lakh goods. Okay. So for this, what is the entry? Purchases account to debtor. Here have to pay the just, for example, purchases so and so person and team loss, so purchase account debtor to so and so person. Cash and అంటే purchase account debtor to cash account అంటాం, cash or bank account అంటాం. But here with GST have to pay. So in the case of intrastate supply, what is the entry? Purchase account debtor, input CGST. In the case of intrastate, you have to pay CGST, SGST, na? CGST account, SGST account, debtor to cash or bank account. What is the entry for purchases in the case of intrastate? Purchase account debtor, CGST account debtor, SGST account debtor to cash or bank. So on 1 lakh, if you have to pay the GST is 18% అనుకోండి. 18% అని అంటే ఇప్పుడు సెంట్రల్కి పే చేయాలి, స్టేట్కి పే చేయాలి. 50-50% అనుకున్నాగా మీకు ఫిఫ్త్ సెమ్లో ఉంటాయి ఇవన్నీ. 50-50% మీన్స్ 18% అని అంటే 18,000 అవుతుంది. ఆన్ 1 lakh 18,000. On 1 lakh 18,000 means what? 50-50% is 9,000, 9,000. So on the opposite side of the purchase account, you have to write 1 lakh and CGST is 9,000 and SGST is 9,000. Total 1 lakh 18,000 have to credit the amount. This is the procedure for purchases in the case of intrastate supply. So, same. For example, when you take the sales entry interstates. Interstates means what? Between the state. So here accounts receivable means cash, cash account debtor to sales account under. So here sales means what? Outward supply. Outward supply means here interstate supply means what? Here you have to pay the only IGST. So what is the entry? Cash and bank account debtor to sales account to IGST account. Okay, total same 1 lakh sales అనుకోండి. You have to pay 18%, 18,000 only here. In the case of interstate supply, you pay the only IGST. On 1 lakh, 18% is 18,000. So here sales 1 lakh 18,000 with GST 1 lakh 18,000, and to opposite of the sales account you write 1 lakh, and output of the IGST have to write 18,000. This is the procedure for calculation of advance in accounting, either interstate supply na, either intrastate supply na. Interstate supply means inward supply. Sorry, purchase. Purchases means inward supply. Sales means outward supply. And again, you have to see the that one is comes under intrastate supply na, interstate supply na. If intrastate supply of services either inward supply na either outward supply na, here you have to pay SGST and IGST. In the case of interstate supply of goods or services లలో either that one is comes under inward supply na outward supply na, you have to pay the IGST like that. Like that you have to write the entries. Yeah. Here reconciliation between the GSTR to purchase register, sales register and books account లో ERP నా modules లలో మీరు మ్యాచ్ చేసుకొని చేయాలి. ఓకే. ఇఫ్ ఇన్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ రివర్స్ చార్జ్ మెకానిజం ఉంది, RCM అంటారు దీన్ని. అకౌంట్స్ ని RCM రివర్స్ చార్జ్ మెకానిజం లో అండర్ RCM ద రిసిపియంట్ పేస్ GST ఇన్స్టెడ్ ఆఫ్ ద సప్లయర్ అకౌంటింగ్ ఎంట్రీస్ expenses account data either input to IGST or CGST or SGST account data to bank or cash account to GST payable under RCM. అండర్ రివర్స్ చార్జ్ మెకానిజంలో ఎంతైతే ఫస్ట్ డెబిట్ చేసి అందులో నుంచి ఎంతైతే ఎంతైతే పే చేయాలనో, అంటే ఐదర్ జిఎస్టీ కింద అండర్ ఆర్సీఎం రివర్స్ చార్జ్ మెకానిక్ కింద ఎంత పే చేయాలనో అది డెబిట్ చేసి దాని నుంచి లెస్ చేసుకుంటూ మీరు ఎంట్రీ రాయాల్సి ఉంటుంది. ఓకే. దిస్ ఈస్ ద ప్రొసీజర్ ఫర్ క్యాలిక్యులేషన్ ఆఫ్ అడ్వాన్స్ అకౌంటింగ్. ఇంకా ఉన్నాయి మీకు నెక్స్ట్ క్లాస్లో అవి డిస్కస్ చేస్తాం ఫర్ అడ్వాన్స్ అకౌంటింగ్. Is it clear? Yeah. Any doubt? This is the procedure for today. We discussed about the tax deducted source, tax collected at source, input tax credit mechanism, and valuation of GST. Okay. In this, valuation of GST is very, very important. In short questions, they ask the TDS and TCA separately. Either in long question, they can ask for TDS and TCA, tax deducted source and tax collected at source కూడా మళ్ళీ అడగచ్చు ఛాన్స్ ఉంటుంది డిఫరెంట్ వేలో కాకుండా. నెక్స్ట్ ఇన్ ద కేస్ ఆఫ్ ఇన్పుట్ ట్యాక్స్ క్రెడిట్ మెకానిజంలో who are applicable, who are not applicable, who are comes under ITC, and also how to pay. That means ఒకవేళ ఐజిఎస్టీలో ఐటీసీ అమౌంట్ ఉందంటే హౌ టు ప్లే ఫస్ట్ యూ హ్యావ్ టు పే ఐజిఎస్టీ, ఆఫ్టర్ దట్ యూ గో టు ద సిజిఎస్టీ ఎస్జిఎస్టీ లైక్ దట్. ఓకే. నెక్స్ట్ హౌ టు క్లెయిమ్ ఐటీసీ, ఐదర్ షార్ట్ క్వశ్చన్స్ అన్నా లాంగ్ క్వశ్చన్స్ అడిగే ఛాన్స్. ఓకే. ఎనీ డౌట్? Shall I close? Bye.